Vice President Harris walked onto stage today. Eugene Goodman escorted her. He is the heroic officer who held off rioters during the Capitol siege. The first Latina on the Supreme Court swore her in on a Bible belonging to its first black justice. The vice president surrounded by people who made history. Then she made it herself. Here's CNBC's Bertha Coombs.
Kamala Harris, do solemnly swear.
Kamala Harris swearing to uphold the law of the land.
That I will support and defend the Constitution.
Just like the 48 vice presidents before her, but for the very first time, that oath uttered by a woman, the first black woman and first American of Asian descent.
The duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
The first graduate of a historically black college to reach such high office.
Black woman
on a
power.
Bible that belonged to Thurgood Marshall, the first black jurist on the Supreme Court.
So help me God. So help me God.
A day of pride.
Howard University.
I am just ecstatic. I can't even put the words to it.
Who thought that the day that Kamala marched across that stage, that one day she was marching to the White House?
Harris, no stranger to blazing trails. The first black district attorney of San Francisco, first black attorney general of California, the state's first black U.S. senator.
And you say she's not black?
One for the history books on so many fronts.
I think the representation of Kamala Harris means a lot to women across the globe. I think it means a lot to first-generation immigrants. I think it means a ton to children of immigrants, but to black women especially.
And to women like Kamala Harris's late mother, who encouraged their little girls to dream, not just for themselves, as Harris put it last fall.
While I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last. Because every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibilities.
And little boys, too. Harris's husband, Doug Emhart, breaking new ground as the first male vice presidential spouse. The second gentleman is what he'll be called, Chet.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.
It is axiomatic that Kamala Harris is a black woman. Her phenotype is black and her genotype is Indian and Jamaican. Black. But let's listen to what she personally identified herself as. And let's look at some of the history that she did share with the general public regarding black people.
Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman.
Well, I can say no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman.
I respect either one. I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn, and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that she is...
I think somebody should look into that too when you continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
Madam DA, back to the question I posed earlier, I'm wondering whether or not with these kinds of numbers, it's a challenge to reform the criminal justice system, to keep our people out of it, a challenge. That's why it's one of the top 10 issues. That's why it's in this covenant document. But these numbers don't inspire hope necessarily. That there are going to be enough of us around in the coming months and years, certainly years, to implement this covenant the way these numbers are going.
The covenant, first of all, Tavis, I want to thank you for what you've done bringing us together and convening us. We've had a lot of time waiting to come out to talk with each other and bond, and it's an incredible group. The criminal justice system is not working for the African American community. I can tell you as the chief law enforcement officer for a major city in this country that it is not working. We see that in the statistics that you've outlined. 2 million people are in the prison system in this country. Over 40% are African American, in spite of the fact that we only constitute 13% of the general population. It's not working. It's not working when we recognize that African American men, the leading cause of their death is homicide. We are overly represented both as victims and as defendants and as witnesses. Our communities suffer because our babies hear the gunfire every night, so the 7-year-old has post-traumatic stress disorder and cannot go to school the next day and learn. The criminal justice system is not working for us. What I think we have failed to do as a community, however, is own this issue of law enforcement. We talk about these statistics in the context always of it is unfair, it's morally incorrect. Maybe we have learned that from the church. It is morally incorrect. But nobody cares about that. You can look at Katrina. Nobody cares about the fact that we've got a bunch of young black and brown men in prison. That argument is not working. What I suggest we do as African Americans is own this issue in law enforcement and then define it in the way that works for us. Because it is a myth to say that African Americans don't want law enforcement. We do. We want our grandmothers to be able to walk to church and be safe. We want our babies to be able to walk to the park and be safe. What we don't want is racial profiling. What we don't want is excessive force. Right. What we don't want is to have our civil liberties and civil rights be stripped. But we do want law enforcement. So let's define it in the way that works for us by saying, I want community policing. I want a police department that works in my neighborhood and in my community that reflects the mores and the culture and respects my grandmother, again, when they walk in to talk to her. I want a system of accountability in the criminal justice system that says law enforcement needs to own crime prevention as much as it talks about long sentences. Because nationally, only 18% of serious crime results in an arrest. So if I, as law enforcement, with my responsibility to keep you safe, only talk about keeping you safe by sending people to prison for a long time, I'm necessarily going to fall short because the vast majority of that crime's not even hitting my system. So if I'm going to keep my promise to you to keep you safe, I better talk with you about what I'm doing in terms of crime prevention, which means recognizing that people coming out of the state prisons, 60% will recidivate if we don't get them in reentry programs, if we don't get them in job training, job readiness, get them in programs that deal with their substance abuse, get them in meaningful housing and employment so they don't recidivate. We could talk about it in terms of, is it the right thing to do? Of course it is. But I'm done talking about it like that. I'll just talk about it on this basis. If that person commits another crime, I have to spend $10,000 to try that felony. They sit in my county jail for $35,000 a year. I'm running a reentry program out of my office in the San Francisco DA's office that brings folks back into the community at an expense of $8,000 a year, guarantees them employment, guarantees them meaningful reunification with their family, and in that way, fulfills my responsibility to keep my community safe. So let's redefine this issue in the context of public safety and just simply talk about doing crime prevention, investing in people coming out of prisons is the smart thing to do for law enforcement. Forget that it's just the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do.
Thank you, Kamala. Madam DA.
Peace and blessings, family. I'm your brother in the struggle, Brother Minister Alif. And as I always say, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent or a humanitarian. I believe in blacks finally getting ourselves back together and taking back our planet, which covers 196,940,000 square miles. Getting rid of all the old and bringing in the new and doing something for ourselves. Now, the sister Kamala Harris, a lot of people is saying she's not black. Of course, Donald Trump, he chimed in saying that he didn't know she was black. So let's do a little fact checking here. Let's analyze, deputize, and scrutinize. First of all, Kamala, Allah? What do that mean, Kamala? Phonetically, Kam is the ancient name of Kemet or Black Egypt, and Allah means God. So Kamala means the black goddess. It's from the Sanskrit or the lotus or pale red flower. In the Hindu tradition, she's associated with the goddess known as Lakshmi. She was the goddess of what? Money. She was the goddess of getting money. She was the goddess that got more money than any other known goddess in India. She was the goddess of wealth and prosperity, family. So Back in 2006, who was the #1 black leader when it came to the black agenda? It was none other than Tavis Smiley. And who was sitting on the stage with Tavis Smiley talking about black issues? It was none other than Kamala Harris. Listen up, fam. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, hotep, peace to the gods, peace to the goddesses. I'm your brother in the struggle, brother ministeralif. And today, family, we're going to cover some of the facts and fiction regarding Kamala Harris. Before we get into the facts and fictions, let me explain my personal and political position. One, I am not a Democrat. I've never, ever been a Democrat. I am not a Republican. I have never, ever been a Republican. I'm just a brother in the struggle for freedom, justice, and equality. And when it comes to politics, I got mixed feelings, mixed emotions. You know what I mean? I'm like, you know what I mean? Where if our people was properly organized, we would not have to depend on the political system. But since we are not, realistically, we're in a position where the masses of our people are literally mentally dead, and whether they vote or don't vote is irrelevant to the county politicians, the state politicians, and the federal politicians, and the international politicians, because they make decisions that affect black people's lives each and every day. I just turned on the news within the last, like, say 24 hours. This is August the 12th, 2024, and cities like counties like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, you have people that literally came up with concepts saying, well, we can save a couple of $1 million if we stop sending buses to pick up children to take them to school. You know, and when you're not politically affiliated and you're not organized as a collective, this is the type of technology that can take place where, you know, they can literally have our children walking through the snow. The particular county in question, they don't even have sidewalks, so they could get hit by, they had something like, I think it was 50,000 cars zoom by there every day. So mathematically, at least 8 children are going to get murdered or killed, you know what I mean, because of this policy. But when we're not politically organized, we suffer, okay? Now, is Kamala Harris our Moses? Of course not. I mean, do I agree with all of Kamala Harris's positions? Of course not. There's a lot of things that I love about her. There's a lot of things I hate about her. There's a lot of things that I support and won't support. But overall, because we're in an election year, when I look at the Republican Party, not just former President Trump, but just looking at their agenda, their aims, their plans, you know what I mean, their desire, it's like, yo, as a black man, I have to make sure these crazy behind, racist behind Republicans don't get in office. Plain and simple. So, in today's video, you know, I took and did the mathematics. I did the cause and effects, the actions and reactions, the positives and the negatives about Kamala Harris. And while I absolutely disagree with her and the Democratic Party on a lot of stuff, That's why me personally, I would never register as a Democrat. You know what I mean? I think the Republicans are the big devil. In 2024, I look at the Democrats as the medium-sized devil. They still devils, but they're not as crazy as these Republicans. You know what I mean? And then again, you have the independents. You have those that strive to do for self. We're in the minority, but it's like the little devil. You know what I mean? So, in this particular dissertation, you're going to see in 1986, I take you back, because the primary purpose of this video is to look at the fact checks of President Donald Trump when he came before the black sisters at the Black Journalist issue. And he basically was like, he did not know that Kamala identified herself as black. And even though I don't personally agree with Trump or the Republican Party, they have a lot of good points that I recognize and respect. So I was like, okay, maybe Trump knows what he's talking about. So I had to fact check former President Trump. And personally, when I fact checked, President Trump claimed that one, he did not know that Kamala Harris identified as black, and two, that she was not black, that she identified basically as Indian or Jamaican or Indian Jamaican. Professionals would say that claim is false. I'm a realist, so I basically tell you, like, he's lying. Plain and simple. He's lying, family. I mean, and there's a lot of black leaders and people that I personally recognize, respect, and support financially and politically and socially. And they attack Kamala Harris in different levels. But when I looked, I don't take their word hook, line, and sinker. I took in did the mathematics on my own. God adds and multiply, the devil divides and subtract. And when I took and researched it, it was like, she absolutely got a lot of crap with her. She's going to have a hard way of becoming president of the United States of America as far as a national agenda is concerned. But overall, I give credit where credit is due. I mean, me personally, whether she gets in office or not, she got my vote. You know what I mean? So let's look at some of these things. In 1986, she graduated from a historically black college and university, Howard University. That is not my opinion. That is just the mathematics of how that mathematically unfolded. Okay, it's 2024 today. Back in 2006, she was on a panel of emerging, quote, black leaders. Now, she won't get into this, but me personally, I really was impressed with her being on this panel, because this wasn't a black panel back then in 2006. This was the publicly over #1 black panel in the world. It was headed by Tavis Smiley himself. She was sitting next to all these black leaders. And she explained on stage, I want to quote her on stage. She explained basically, she said, quote, "What I suggest we do as African Americans is own this issue and law enforcement, and then define it in the way that works for us." When I listened to her on Tavis Smiley's panel of emerging black leaders, I personally, at that time, I personally was like, damn, This is a strong sister. Damn, this is a smart sister. She was out California, but she was talking issues that affected us in Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, or the Delaware Valley, if you will. I mean, so what I decided to do, it was share with y'all some of the original and divine and direct quotes from this sister, Kamala Harris. That way you don't have to take my word for it. You can hear it for yourself. Listen up. In this clip, Kamala Harris discusses the importance of the community at a 100 Black Men of America conference in Atlanta, Georgia. Listen up, fam.
Well, let's talk about this capital for entrepreneurs and small businesses, because that's been a really important part of your mandate here as Vice President. But little do a lot of people know, you were doing this long before you even got to the White House. You've been a huge proponent about entrepreneurship dollars and stuff that's available now, and a lot of people are not aware. There's a lot of, like you said, really brilliant people in this audience here who are entrepreneurs. The minds in this room is really sharp. There's some really sharp people here, right? And if they only knew what was available for them. Tell us more about this work for small business and entrepreneurs.
So like you said, see, when I was in the United States Senate, I actually was responsible with a group of senators for getting $12 billion more into our community banks. So the importance of community banks is they are, as they are called, they're in the community, led by members of the community. They are people who understand the capacity of the community, the needs of the community, the culture of the community. They are folks who, unlike the big banks, will see the dream that an individual has for what is possible. And instead of rejecting that dream because maybe it's something they've not heard before, they will listen to it and then give folks advice, including financial literacy advice, helping people know how to run a payroll, how to deal with inventory, in a way that they can start a business and sustain that business and grow that business. So the money that we are putting in community banks is intentional in that it is there that we believe there is going to be the greatest opportunity for folks in the community to actually do the work that's about entrepreneurship. Since I've been Vice President, I also created what's called the Economic Opportunity Council, and I got the big banks and big tech companies to invest private equity into community banks. And we're on track to getting $3 billion more into community banks because of that partnership. And there's a specific piece of that that's very important. You know that VCs, venture capitalists, only 2% of their investments are Black businesses. All right? We also know that Black folks are 1/3, I think the number is 3 times less likely to apply for business loans. And a big part of that is that nobody likes to be disappointed, right? And the feeling, rightly, after so many things can disappoint, that I don't want to go for it and then be rejected. So again, putting the money into community banks is about putting it into a place where people can walk in with a sense of dignity that is respected to actually be able to have access to capital. So we're doing that. The other piece that we have done is from the day that we came in office as administration, President Biden and I made a commitment that we would increase federal government contracts by 50% to minority-owned businesses. And understand what that means. Once you get a federal contract, it's usually for 5 years, and you can renew it for 10, 20, 30 years. So see, unless somebody messes that thing up, it's yours for a very long time, which is going to be a source of incredible wealth-growing opportunity for yourself, for your family, and for your community. So these are some of the things we've done around access to capital to address.
That's getting your 501c3 and getting your System for Awards Management number. You can get government contracts right there in the hood and make money for the hood.
We are putting billions of dollars on the streets of America to upgrade sidewalks, roads, bridges, freeways. Do you know that over 90% of construction companies employ 20 or fewer people? Those are small businesses. Think about, we are putting over $1 trillion by my calculation on the streets of America over the next 10 years to invest in a clean energy economy, adaptation and resilience to extreme climate occurrences, federal contracts. What we are doing with the CHIPS and Science Act, we are investing in semiconductor manufacturing here in the United States because we know, and we learned if we didn't know before during the pandemic, this supply chain thing can really mess you up. And we need domestic production and manufacturing of some of these essential needs. So in the last 3 years, our accomplishments around growing the economy of America in a broad-based economic policy means putting trillions of federal dollars into the economy, which will require for it to be meaningful, folks to take up those contracts to do the work that is about building our nation. So that's part of why I'm here, is to ask everyone here, help me get out the word of what we are doing, and that the Small Business Administration, as an example, and we have representatives here, we have the Deputy Secretary of Commerce here, the Deputy Secretary of Treasury here, help get the word out about what is available, because too often, like I said, Black folks are 3 times less likely to apply for these things. But we gotta let people know that it's there so that they will apply and take advantage of what we are doing, including we have finally gotten rid of the prohibition on people with a criminal record being able to apply for SBA loans. We just got rid of that.
38-year-old Kamala Harris was swept into office as San Francisco's district attorney, and as she did, she made history.
For too long, we've asked these very simplistic questions about criminal justice policy that offer only 2 choices. You know, either you're soft on crime or you're tough on crime. And instead, I suggest we should be smart on crime.
What was smart about the Smart on Crime campaign? You're telling the progressives, like, I'm not just gonna throw everybody in jail. You're telling people who want, you know, more of a tough on crime approach that, like, I still believe in this. She was prosecutor coming out of the tough on crime 90s.
At a time when American drug policy was incredibly committed. The idea was that tough on crime isn't working. What we need is the numbers rather than the emotions that are driving a lot of our policing.
Let's build metrics into our measure of how effective we have been with our criminal justice system.
The metrics by which she judges her success. As a prosecutor, it's the numbers, the cases that you won.
I did an analysis of who our homicide victims were who were under the age of 25 when they were killed. And I learned that 94% of them were high school dropouts. Perhaps untraditional for me to ask the question, but I did.
She was raised primarily by a single immigrant mother who was a scientist. It's kind of like, what can you prove, not what do you feel?
Nobody is looking to their DA for soaring speeches about the future of democracy.
But I also think that women, in order to be taken seriously, particularly in politics, you do have to show that you have a command of the facts, the figures, the numbers, that you're not emotional.
And so that aspect of national politics has not come very easily to her.
Kamala Harris, a candidate for California's Attorney General. Your opponent, Ron Gold, has said that he is for the legalization of marijuana recreationally. Your thoughts on that?
That he is entitled to his opinion.
It was very difficult to pin her down about what she thought about things.
Kamala Harris's stance on teacher tenure is not entirely clear.
She would try to say, you know, I am a prosecutor, I have to remain neutral about these things, I really shouldn't take a position.
I have many clients in that matter, so I cannot talk with you about what we're doing in terms of the case.
Very seldom is she like first on an issue, right? She kind of like checks out the temperature first, sees how others around her are kind of reacting, and then she jumps in.
I want to be very well informed about exactly where it's going, what the potential of my opinion would be before I just to express something off the cuff.
She also enters public life at a time when we really didn't see any women of color in prominent positions in elected life.
It was a different time in a largely white political system. She had those ambitions from, I think, a very young age to make it in politics, to be highly successful, to make lives better for people. But I think she also knew that as a woman of color in positions that had always been held by white people, she wasn't always going to be the one who was out on the front edge. She's not a trailblazer in a policy sense.
California's Attorney General Kamala Harris announced that she will indeed run for the U.S. Senate.
Our new U.S. Senator, Kamala Harris!
Can you think of any laws that give government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm happy to answer a more specific question.
That the government has the power to make a decision about a man's body?
I thought you were asking about medical procedures that are unique to men.
I'll repeat the question. Can you think of any laws that give the government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm not thinking of any right now, Senator.
Kamala Harris really thrives as a politician, and this makes sense in the context of her background when she's the one asking the questions.
They have not asked me to open an investigation, but...
Perhaps they've suggested?
I don't know, I wouldn't say suggest.
Hinted?
I don't know.
Inferred? You don't know. Okay. In your March 24th summary, you wrote that, quote, after reviewing the special counsel's final report...
I will say that no one...
Sir, I'm asking a question.
What a lot of Americans saw was a senator who just seemed exciting, who seemed willing to hold these men accountable, not let them kind of worm their way out of the questions she was asking.
That was really important for Kamala Harris when she served in the Judiciary Committee. She knew how to turn conversations into really serious examinations and cross-examinations of the folks who were brought before the committee, almost like a perfect recipe there for her to introduce a version of herself to folks who might not know her outside of California.
I do want you to be honest.
I'm not able to be rushed this fast. It makes me nervous.
I think the fact that those clips went viral shows that there's an appetite, right? She is positioning herself as America's advocate.
You had donors, just busting down her door after that, saying you need to run for president.
I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States.
Her campaign announcement in Oakland, I think there were 20,000 people there. It was just sort of insane. Expectations have become so high for her after those moments. Came to, what do you know about this person?
The difference, obviously, between now and 2020 is the Dobbs decision.
The moment where the Kamala Harris that voters are seeing right now really started to come into being was in 2022 when the Dobbs decision leaked.
A woman's right to abortion has been overturned and will lead to nearly total bans on the procedure in about half the states.
The significance of that is profound in terms of what it means for the rights of individuals, and in particular for the right of an individual to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do.
Through my reporting, what I found was that she was virtually the only major official in Washington who understood the salience of that issue. Suddenly, she sees for herself a role in this administration, being the spokesperson for the Biden White House on the issue of abortion. It's something that is very sincere to her beliefs.
This is about people having the freedom to make the decision that is in their own best interest.
I think that was hugely essential for her growth as a politician and just trusting her own instincts.
In America, freedom is not to be given. It is ours by right.
Now we're seeing her in more comfortable settings, especially in the last year, college tours, small businesses, talking about economic opportunity, loan cancellation, climate, and it's those kinds of forums where she really does shine.
We are not going back.
The speech that she gave in Wisconsin was really interesting, where she almost stumbles into a new rallying cry for the campaign. The folks who were in that high school auditorium latched on to that line and started chanting it back to her. And she realizes in the moment that she has stumbled upon a new phrase. It is specific enough to resonate with people. It's general enough to not necessarily have to define it too carefully. That kind of describes not just her campaign, not just this moment, but can describe a little bit of just how spoiled and rotten the vibes were in the country before Biden dropped out, because it's an opportunity for a lot of folks to be re-inspired and reawakened.
The word authenticity is often so fraught with racial and sexist undertones, but you look at the rallies, the talks that she's doing right now, this is a person who's having fun.
The most important thing I love you back.
That ease and confidence with which she is currently carrying herself is reflective of someone who knows that the story of her career basically is not a net negative for her.
I will proudly put my record against his any day of the week.
You've seen her kind of embrace her biography as a person, as a woman of color, and she's realized that her personal story is actually powerful and it helps her relate to people, it helps voters relate to her.
She's a complex woman who has complex ideas and is very cautious, steady, not going to rock the boat a whole lot, and down the middle, a consensus person.
I'll tell you, on the subject of my mother, and I keep saying this, but it's true, you know, she said, just since we were young, you know, you may be the first to do many things, but make sure you're not the last.